Thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here. We were talking, I was talking with Amanda before we began. The world shaking, that's almost too generous a term. The disgusting display of the President of the United States yesterday in the Oval Office was devastating in ways that are really hard for us to, we can't forget. And it's a change, it's like an outbreak of war or something. It's significant as far as an event, but thank God it isn't about anything more than the disgusting individual who occupies the position of president. But that is in our thoughts. And I want to say that in defense of all of us who are not focusing exactly there, we had to write this beforehand. and you know, so the general malaise is there, but the specificity, of course, has to drop out to a certain degree, but not with mediated immediacy, which is a term I'm not wedded to. It's a term, as you will see, I think the whole idea of concepts is ridiculous. I want to get away from concepts and back to a very specificity of our approach to thought. Hence, what you're going to see here is an experimental thing that I've been trying recently, which is there is no text. There are 106 slides, and 100 slides equals half an hour, at least normally. See, some of these I'm not going to, well, I'll read this one. It's just, no one is listening to us. We have nothing to tell. It's best to wait and experience something. I mean, that's a kind of critique of the classroom, which of course at Brown is not the case. This is my last book, actually, which came out in 2024. It's called Thinking, Making Room for Thought. And I worked with people who do graphics. Maybe some of you know Boot Boys Biz. Okay, so that guy, Kevin, did the graphics for what I had done graphically in an earlier time in life. And so what it makes me recognize is that our method has got to be somewhat experimental given the transformations of technology. And this is just a page spread from that book. Wikipedia took on the task of knowledge for the 21st century, thank God, because I'm beginning to forget names, places, dates, etc. But the question of method, the how of knowledge, remains. So I made PowerPoint slides that I sent to these other guys who did then a InDesign version of my PowerPoints, and then came the book. So the idea is that we're working through several media, and mediated immediacy is about media, and it's about the how of knowledge, and it's about my translation, which is better than what you'll find in the Harvard Arcades project. I have nothing to say, only to show. So mediated immediacy is about bringing sense experience back to philosophy, banished by Hegel's philosophy of mind. So here we go. Sense experience. If you remember your Hegel phenomenology of mind, right? Sense experience. It starts with sense experience. This here is present for an I now. But I turn around, and this is no longer here. If now this is noon, we look again at the written truth. We shall, oh wait, now is night. We write down this truth. A truth cannot lose anything by being written down. If now, this noon, we look again at the written truth, we shall have to say that it has become stale. The now that is night is preserved as something that is night, but it proves itself to be, on the contrary, something that is not for the now. There is still a now, but is no longer night. This is all quotations from Hegel. Now remains the universal. There is always a now, but it is empty of content. And the same is true of here and is. What holds these things together is the I, for whom something is here, now. I hold them together. Now is day because I see it. So what seemed to be the experience of the object is the experience of the subject. Sense certainty, says Hegel, is empty. This is anything you like. But if I want to help out language, which has the divine nature of directly reversing the meaning of what is said, of making it into something else, and thus not letting what is meant get into words at all by pointing out, for example, this piece of paper, I take the truth of it, wahrnehmen, or perceive it. So perception takes what is present to it as a universal, an object with properties, paper, lined, etc. Hegel's example here is salt, white, tarred, cubical in shape, each property being a not other things, i.e. perception contains the negative difference. I'm not going to go on with this because I realize that this is precisely the problem with Hegel, is he's got so many words to talk about this here now. So what follows in Hegel's argument is the moment of the disappearance of sense experience. Quote, seeing and hearing have been lost to consciousness, and as perception, consciousness has arrived at thoughts, which it brings together. Hegel's next move is to force an understanding, and it's a magnet. Force is only, and I'm just not going to go through all of this because we've lost some time, but just let me speak it, which is, you know, a magnet, you don't know what a magnet is until it has an interrelationship with something else. So then he's talking about magnets and magnetism, but then he says we really aren't at the concept yet. And when we get to the concept, it's the law of gravity. So the concept now is empty of every particular of the here and now, and is simply the law, the concept, and reason. And I'm going to argue that in the contemporary period, when we have a totally different mediation of knowledge, that this way of approaching things from the position of Western modernity is precisely what we have to get away from. Hegel denigrates immediacy. In the logic, he says, in simple terms, thinking it over changes something. And the thought process moves to the universal with the help of language, which has the divine, I think I already read that. Okay, so here we are. But what if you take a photograph of something here and now, or record it? Mediated immediacy becomes something different. Perpetual seeing, perpetual hearing. And this would be sense experience in the age of its mechanical reproducibility. One could move here to the way a camera must capture the epidermis of strangers. The specificity of the photograph changes the ontological question. For Heidegger, Dasein, the one for whom being is a question, Dasein is in each case mine, is an I where the specifics are, to my experience, abstracted from race, gender, sex, class. Sensory reproducibility exposes rather, and this is my argument, the emptiness not of sense experience, but the emptiness of the concept. This privileging of the concept is a prejudice of all modern Western philosophy. It is present in phenomenology from Husserl to Heidegger to Merleau-Ponty. Indeed, the entirety of what Ainslie-Lasure calls appropriately the motley crew of phenomenologists. Lasure has written perceptively and concretely about how this situation of thought through abstraction leaves Frantz Fanon existentially vulnerable when he leaves his native Martinique and enters France, when his own understanding of himself as a universal subject, the generalized I of Cartesian experience, is undermined by a little white French boy who exclaims to his mama, "Look, a Negro, and I'm scared." Lasure describes the hallucinatory effect on Fanon of this address that disturbs Fanon's very sense of subjectivity. For Fanon, and I'm quoting Ainslie-Lasure, the myth of the Negro feels like a hallucination because the white cultural world a mythological European fabrication that takes on the value of reality, is taken for reality. When he is overtaken by blackness as a hallucination, he loses touch with the tactile, vestibular, kinesthetic data of his own phenomenal body, that his own phenomenal body displays without verification. But it is still there. It didn't go anywhere. And then the white gaze triggers Fanon's experience of blackness as a hallucination because Fanon possesses the same world that the white child possesses. We share this world in common as a hallucination of justified inequality. That's me. And so this leads to the double bind of abstract universality. In his most recent book, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, a former Fox News personality and military veteran, now Secretary of Defense, asked whether General Charles C.Q. Brown would have gotten the job if he were not Black. He wrote, "I want to thank General Charles C.Q. Brown." Oh, wait, a short time ago, Trump fired Brown. He wrote, "I want to thank General Charles C.Q. Brown for his over 40 years of service to our country, including as our current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is a fine gentleman and an outstanding leader, and I wish him a great future and for his family." Now, see, here's the problem and the double bind. If critics claim that Trump is firing C.Q. Brown because he is Black, Trumpites respond that it's we who are equating his firing with skin color. We can't win for losing. This is the general condition of cognition that defines Trump's world. The reality of racism in the hallucinatory world is the insistence that racism doesn't exist. When Blacks and women are fired, if we doubt the objectivity of this move, it is we who are accused of looking at skin color rather than merit. DEI is necessary because of the specificities of sense experience that do not disappear into the abstraction, even when they are denied. A photograph does not leave out the world, not race, not sex, not class, not historical moment. This is a meaning, a consequence of what I am calling mediated immediacy. These are photographs from the W.E.B. Du Bois exhibition of Negro life that was shown in Paris in 1900. I'm going to have some more of those images. So abstraction itself is not abstract. It has a specific hallucinatory function in the world. Work with images embodies specificity. There is no image of man that does not visibly exclude woman. And there is no image of a human that allows you to ignore the color line. Now, this is to give you the whole story of this is maybe too long, but this is really interesting because this book that no one reads, you can't get it. I say no one reads it because you can't get it for free online. So that must mean there's a small demand for it, right? So this is William Altman's book, Martin Heidegger and the First World War. In other words, instead of seeing Being in Time as anticipating fascism, you see it as a reflection on World War I and on the first mass experience of Vorlaufende, that is running toward death. And it's not just anticipation of death, it's running toward death. And you think of the Battle of Verdun, which as a mass experience of being German is rushing into the fire that killed, I think 2 million people were killed in that war, 2 million Germans or 2 million French as well, I'm not quite sure, but it was mass slaughter. So suddenly, if you see the specificity of being at a particular time, at a particular place, then you see that the ontology is precisely what Chandler, in his work on Du Bois, calls para-ontology, which is like paramilitary. It's pseudo-ontology. And that's kind of a quick way to talk about this. So para-ontology is a critical practice of the as-if, exposing the inverted logic, the radical difference explains the socio-historical one. If the new technologies of mediation reproduce precisely perceived differences, then being human can never be abstract, never be seen without the cultural, historical, biological, social, etc. differences that define us. Fragmentation. I want to also say that fragmentation's been on the table a couple of times. This is a fragmented presentation, right? That one good thing about something like this, you just have kind of color-coordinated blocks and you move them around in different presentations. So this one is meant to be for you in 30 minutes. Gerhard Richter was a teenager when Allies firebombed his city of Dresden, Germany, where he was born in 1932. His father and uncle fought for the Nazis. He wrote, "The most banal amateur photograph is more beautiful than the most beautiful painting by Cézanne." And that's an infinite respect for mediated immediacy. Here's one of Du Bois's other images from Visualizing Black America. This is a painting made to look like a photograph by Richter, the very famous one of his daughter Betty. It is difficult to see in these photos only skin color. One finds oneself contemplating the details and the beauty of youth, the pose, the grace. These are the overpaintings of Richter, blurring the line between painting, which is, of course, a modern medium, and photograph, which is the medium of our time. The Kantian division of knowledge was always a bit off. In his lectures on Kant's critique of pure reason, Adorno observes that there is, quote, something fishy. That's the English translation. In German, it's the worm in the apple, right? There's something fishy in the disaggregated elements of Kant's philosophy to constitute separate realms, cognition, ethics, aesthetics, based on ideals that are, this is Adorno again, like the famous herrings hanging from the ceiling that people are only allowed to snatch at. These disaggregated elements, these separate realms, are like countries on a map, lying contiguously but independently of one another. This is an image that, the map image, is one that Kant constantly uses as a way, by way of illustration. These realms have no authority one over another. So as a philosophical positioning, none of these three divisions speaks to the holistic transformation of consciousness that is required as a political response to the present crisis of democracy, not to speak of the capitalist ecological crises as well. Reason leads to instrumental transactional politics and perhaps to the rationalization of revolutionary violence. Moral purity, the abstraction of the ethical, is Kant's beautiful soul. It may send individuals to heaven, but it leaves a sullied earth behind. Aesthetics, understood today in the diminished sense of art rather than sensory experience, enacts political protest as autonomy that does not escape the financial interests of the art world. And here's my image for that. This is Dan Pajorski, wonderful cartoonist. Philosophers, of course, have only always interpreted the world, and the point is to change it. Lesueur says that philosophy must give way to politics, but politics is all about action concerning this, here, now, exactly where Hegel begins and tries to get away from. It is also putting your sense-sensitive body on the line. In the French Revolution, news of the public assemblies spread through the European presses, which made journalism central to modern political life. The immediacy of the word in translation, in newspapers and national media, literacy was not universal, but this was the specifically bourgeois revolution. So it's the revolution of words, the typewritten or typeset voice. Mediation through the word, then as now, softens the violence of revolutionary acts, so that even as restrained a man as Kant could, at the end of his life, have enthusiasm for the revolutionaries. Hegel, still a young man, attempted in the French Revolution, to reconcile the unruly revolution with a theory of history that saw reason as being realized in the world, but only after the fact, in retrospect, and through a dialectical transformation of the many actors into the dictatorial one of Napoleon. And this, of course, is the owl of Minerva spreads its wings only with the coming of the dusk. So this is only in retrospect, i.e. as a kind of justification of the violence, that we see reason has in fact emerged. I won't read this wonderful thing that he talks about, during the revolution, everybody's like, it's like a bacchanal and everybody's like drunk and then they all fall down. And that leads to a space of tranquility, which is, it's so full of sensory immediacy that it's actually a very good piece of Hegelian writing. And this is from something I wrote before. Hegel, writing in the Phenomenology of Mind, it is in a study, interpreted the advancing army of Napoleon as the unwitting realization of reason. But Sir Charles Bell, who as a field doctor performing limb amputations was physically present a decade later at the Battle of Waterloo, had a very different interpretation. Quote, Bell, "It is a misfortune to have our sentiments at variance with the universal sentiment, but there must ever be associated with the honors of Waterloo, in my eyes, the shocking signs of woe. To my ears, accents of intensity, outcry from the manly breast, interrupted, forcible expressions from the dying, and noisome smells. I must show you my notebook with sketches of the wounded. You see one of those images here, for it may convey an excuse for this excess of sentiment." And I'm going to talk about the animation of the line. The line should be the most abstract thing, but I'm going to talk about its animation. And this is a very famous drawing by Charles Joseph Minard of Napoleon's army retreating from Moscow in 1812 to 13. The black line straggling back from Moscow shows this terrible rate of casualties, and the temperature scale at the bottom of the image charts the freezing weather conditions of the Russian winter. So the beige line, they're marching into Moscow, and then the retreat. They were drawn into Moscow until winter hit, and then the attempted retreat, and you see the death of foot soldiers with the thinning of the line. So even lines can be sensory experiences. This is just one of my favorite stills from Ivan the Terrible, Part 1 by Sergei Eisenstein. From the many of the revolution to the one of Napoleon as leader, the masses become invisible. Personification of politics in the leader, Napoleon, Hegel, or Stalin, Ivan IV, versus the animation of the line. The animation of the line is like a rhizomic connection, so even lines are not abstract. And then I just want to show you this because I think it's really fascinating, and it dawned on me only because I saw Du Bois's pictures from his exhibition. This is one of Du Bois's graphics from his book that shows Negro life in America that was part of the exhibition in Paris in the year 1900. Now, what does that look like? It looks like Malevich, right? So there's a way that we begin to see that perhaps the origin, and I know there's a story of Malevich's painting, we can go into that if you want. I know the details of that, it's at the bottom here, I cut them out. But what I want to, this is a Liszewski, right? No, this is a Malevich airplane flying. There you have the animation of abstract forms as a way of of Bolshevik artists making visible the masses. I find that really quite fascinating, because if you try to look for a Bolshevik art having an origin in the art of Western Europe, you won't find an origin for it. But if you look at Lissitzky, you will. This on the left is one of the images from Du Bois's social data, and on the right, Mediated, 1916. So on the left, all of those are Du Bois, and on the right, they're all Bolshevik artists. So Du Bois's use of visual display is social statistics as aesthetic form. And I put this in here also to say, let's do away with the divisions that Kant has made in knowledge. And if you look at what he's able to show with a line, this is a black line that shows black wealth rising rapidly between 1880 and 1890, disrupted by lynching. The small print talks about lynching. And what it demonstrates is that the greater the black wealth, the more successful the black population, the more violent the reaction. As he wrote famously, there was one thing that the white South feared more than Negro dishonesty, ignorance, and incompetency, and that was Negro honesty, knowledge, and efficiency. So it's a reversal of cause and effect. Negro proof of equality demands actions of white supremacists that deny it. So Du Bois's genius was precisely his capacity to understand mediated immediacy, what can be shown in what mediated form, not to see sociological graphs, photos, historical studies, novels, newspapers, magazine essays as different aesthetic genre, but as different media of perception. The point is to see the color line through every medium at our disposal. Each provides a different rendering of reality visible. Now, this term space of appearance comes from Arendt. And this famous tennis court oath image from 1794 is already a commemoration of the event that started the French Revolution. But this is here now. It is an intervention in politics in a direct sense, this mediated picture of crowds shown in the front of the Washington Monument during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in August 1963. Martin Luther King used a whole series of formulations about the urgency of the now across his corpus, as well as the formulation all, here, now, in the early 1960s to characterize the rights claims of the SCLC. Now, in 1992, I argued that sensory perception, aesthetikos, had become a form of anesthetics in modern society, numbing the senses to protect against the mass experiences of shock that permeated modernity's industrial and big city life. But today, cell phones, internet, and internet feeds are the instruments of mediated immediacy. This situation can indeed be analyzed in terms of an intensification of anesthetics. The repetition of visually mediated experiences numbs viewers, and remote control turns warfare into a video game. The deceptive potential of AI portends a frightening magnification of misinformation. Under Elon Musk's control, X demonstrated in the November election how effective mediated misinformation can be. And I think, Amanda, it was here. But there is another cognitive effect of mediated immediacy. It exposes, I'm on 75, so I'm really pretty close to the end here. But there is another cognitive effect of mediated immediacy. It exposes the undeniability of police brutality, government repression, climate catastrophe, and imperialist genocide. It disseminates these experiences unedited in lifetime and worldwide. It makes palpably evident the persistence of colonial, racist, and misogynist orderings of the world and the ecocidal relations of production that sustain it. Not the technological means are determining, but the social relations established by them. So Marx versus Heidegger. These relations are open to transformation. The anesthetic effects of distance war killings, however, is reversed when cell phones close to our bodies show us daily the devastating bodily harm inflicted on persons who speak to us in their pain. And here I was going to say, and Trump in his Oval Office is now a immediate image that we know in its repulsive intimacy, and no verbal description could have given us that. So I'm going to go a little quickly here so we get. So we are seeing, I say, a planetary politics unroll before our eyes, because everybody in the world saw this image of Trump yesterday. Everyone say everyone, anybody who wanted to could have seen it. We are seeing a planetary politics unroll before our eyes when Jewish Voices for Peace occupy Grand Central Station in New York City, when South Africa brings legal charges at the World Court against Israel, the UK, and the US for violating international law, when Yemen, a non-sovereign country, wages war on global trade. We are experiencing planetary entanglements. Okay, I'm going to move a little quickly. It's that because I'm only on 80 and I have to get to 100. So let me just show you. Elon Musk views our planet as playpen, and there's another one of these single-use ideas of the planet. And this is Musk's aborted flight crumbing up the Caribbean. Again, I'm going to go a little bit fast here. The hyper-nationalist world fabricated as a power-grabbing strategy by Donald Trump is fake, but its capacity to cloud all clarity of vision is formidable. Trump is the personification of neoliberal individualism as a self-produced, media-created success story via radio talk shows, TV extravaganzas, news headlines, press grabbing, Twitter truth, social, etc. He operates under the logic of capitalist media that appears as its only possible organization, hence his affinity for the billionaire media of CEOs and their algorithmic power over information. Given the capacity of authoritarian, I'm not going to read all that, sorry. Okay, so the present situation, this is my conclusion. I don't know if you can imagine what this is. It's a map of the zones, they're called, that are out of control of any sovereign state, i.e., they're free zones for production, so you don't have to worry about minimum wage, or they're free zones for the wealthy to hide their funds and get out of taxes. In other words, the wealthy class has already moved to a non-nation state sensibility. And we're just beginning to learn that, this is their reality. They have 2 or 3 passports. Now Trump is doing the same thing. If you have $5 million, you can buy a US passport. I mean, this is the way their minds work. It's capitalism that has totally overtaken the state. And anarcho-capitalism, this is a great book, Crack Up Capitalism by Slobodian. The chronic crises of capitalism this time, Peter Thiel and other billionaires propose, is not to fix the crisis. Let the crisis kill the state. Turning political sovereignty into a for-profit enterprise, startup nations, sovereign funds, prisons for profit, unprotected workers with no claims on profits, no health, education, and welfare available otherwise. And this is so important. I just have to do this part too. This is 92. Okay. In the 1980s, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad, proposed explicitly the model for his country's government should be that of a corporation. Malaysia Incorporated was the name for national unity, while trade unions were sidelined and public industries underwent privatization. The same approach was taken by the government of Thailand. A company is a country. A country is a company. They are the same thing. The management is the same. It is the management by economics. From now onwards, this is the era of management by economics, not management by other means. Economics is the deciding factor. In March 2017, I wonder if you remember back then, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, announced that the goal of the administration would be to run the US government like, quote, a great American company. Quote, our hope is that we can achieve success and efficiencies for our customers, who are the citizens. We are told that in the US, a 230-year-old democracy, the category of citizen is to be eradicated and replaced by the customer, and that this at a time when CEOs are increasingly more concerned with attracting investors than pleasing or even having customers. But the larger point is this: the resources of every nation state, its labor, production, taxation, raw materials, are being pressured politically toward enhancing the nation's competitive position within the global capitalist system. Moving here, a venture capitalist who worked for Peter Thiel coined an indigenous term when he called this form of soft secession underthrow. For him, the best model of politics was the corporation. We opt in and out as customers. If we don't like the product, we shop somewhere else. Nobody demands anything of us, and we feel obliged to nobody in particular. We rely on exit rather than voice. Why is having, okay, I'm not going to do that. This is the end, the real end, the telos. Okay. The public good. Remember that? Without a sense of the public good, when problems multiply, the neoliberal trained individual responds by competing harder, cooperating less in order to enter the moneyed class, the self-created elite whose privilege seems to provide for the best possibility of survival. But the public good benefits the 99%. The 1% benefits themselves. A public good is a service or commodity that can be used by everyone in a society without reducing its availability to others. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. Ideas are a public good. In our time, the image okay, I see you looking at your watch. Okay, let me just go ahead to the very, very end here. The loss of the democracy as a consequence of the second election of Trump should not let us forget democracy's strengths in 2024. This, here, now. In 2024, the people acted democratically to occupy public space in Bangladesh, South Korea, Georgia, and most remarkably, Syria, where the spirit of 2011 came back to life, challenging once again the unseeability of the non-Western world. Oh yeah, okay, we're here. Okay, we'll just go to here. This happened a day ago, 2 days ago, when my wonderful country of Greece, the home of democracy, but also the home of my grandfather, went on a huge general strike as an action here now against the billionaires taking over the planet. How about a planetary general strike? Last image. History does not guarantee a rational future or a democratic one, but it does reveal the transiency of material social forms. Decisive will be not new narratives, but the rhizomic penetration of false ones. Methods will need to dismantle the neo-Kantian divisions between cognition, morality, and art. Our task is not to think the world differently, but to see it differently, in ways, to quote Benjamin, entirely useless for fascism. Not separate states, but a singular planet. Not ontological differences, but practices of sociality. Not sovereignty, but solidarity. Not mass culture, but a community of sense. Not xenophobic nationalism, but cosmopolitanism from below. It's a tall order demanding technical skill as well as political commitment, and it is only one part of what needs to be done. Thank you.